Welcome to Animal Attacks. Today, we're looking at snake encounters where completely ordinary moments outside turn dangerous in ways most people never see coming. From a surfer reaching down to free something bright yellow drifting near her ankle in the surf, to a final moment of cutting away a net that changes everything in an instant. Let's start with the first story, where someone begins cutting back a sun-baked hedge that hasn't been touched in weeks. It was January 14th, 2017, in a quiet neighborhood just outside Adelaide. It had been one of those long, hot Australian summers, and after days of relentless heat, everything outside felt dry and sun-baked. Gareth Persky was 61 and had only recently retired after spending more than 20 years delivering mail around the local suburbs. Since losing his wife 2 years earlier, life had become much quieter. Most of his days were pretty simple. He enjoyed working in the garden, keeping the yard tidy, and watching the native birds that stopped by his backyard. Over the years, Gareth had planted a thick hedge of native shrubs along the back fence to attract those birds. But after putting the job off for weeks, the hedge had grown really overgrown. Branches were sticking out everywhere, and he figured it was finally time to cut it back. Rather than paying someone else to do it, he thought, it's just a bit of trimming, it'll only take an afternoon. Honestly, that's exactly the kind of job I probably keep putting off too. The day before, temperatures had climbed past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's actually the kind of weather eastern brown snakes tend to deal with by finding cooler places to hide. Dense hedges like Gareth's are actually perfect for that, because they're shaded and stay noticeably cooler than the open ground. The snakes usually don't go looking for people. If someone reaches in without seeing them, though, they'll defend themselves. I always forget just how well these snakes disappear until I see photos of them in leaf litter. Eastern brown snakes are active during the day and often hunt rodents around farms, gardens, and suburban properties. Despite their reputation, they usually try to avoid people and rely on remaining perfectly still when they feel threatened, which is why people often don't notice them until they're already within striking distance. A nearby resident had previously mentioned seeing a large snake moving along the shared fence line during the warmer months. Gareth acknowledged the warning but never encountered one himself. Unknown to him, a mature eastern brown snake had settled deep within the lower section of the hedge that morning, concealed beneath thick branches only a short distance above the ground. Later that afternoon, Gareth walked into the backyard wearing a short-sleeved shirt, shorts, and open sandals. He wore no protective gloves as he began trimming the outer sections of the hedge with manual clippers before switching to long-handled loppers for the thicker branches. As he reached into the dense foliage to reposition a branch, his right hand came within striking distance of the concealed snake. The strike lasted only a fraction of a second. Gareth instinctively jerked backward and looked down at his wrist, where 2 small puncture marks were visible. There was almost no swelling and very little pain. Believing he had merely scratched himself on a branch, he continued working for several more minutes. As he moved around the hedge, he began feeling slightly nauseated and lightheaded, though he assumed the afternoon heat was catching up with him. He eventually sat down on the lawn, appearing increasingly unsteady. My brain would have never jumped straight to snake bite from 2 tiny puncture marks either. As the venom spread through his bloodstream, it triggered venom-induced consumption coagulopathy, leaving his blood unable to clot properly. As his blood pressure dropped, Gareth became increasingly weak and unsteady. He collapsed near the back steps while trying to make it inside the house. Living alone, he wasn't found until a neighbor spotted him lying motionless in the yard and called emergency services. Paramedics began advanced resuscitation and rushed him to a regional hospital, but he was pronounced dead later that day. The investigation concluded that Gareth died from complications of eastern brown snake envenomation with venom-induced consumption coagulopathy, leading to uncontrolled internal bleeding and a rapid breakdown of the body's clotting system. Medical findings also pointed to cardiovascular collapse as blood pressure dropped sharply after systemic venom spread. Toxicology reports were consistent with severe envenomation, with no evidence of other contributing medical events. His daughter later traveled interstate to settle his affairs, and the property was sold several months afterward. During early maintenance, the new owners removed the overgrown hedge in the backyard, clearing the dense vegetation where the snake had likely been concealed. The neighbor, who had unknowingly captured Garrett's final moments on a security camera, stored the footage away and never watched it. I used to think avoiding tall grass meant avoiding most snake encounters. I was wrong, because this next one starts hundreds of feet offshore, where nobody expected a venomous snake to be drifting through the lineup. It was March 8, 2019, at a popular beach along Queensland's Sunshine Coast. Several days of onshore winds had left the surf rough and pushed unusual marine life close to shore. Kolefai Voros was 29 years old and had grown up near the coast in a family that spent much of their lives around the ocean. She worked part-time at a local cafe, taught weekend surf lessons to children, and regularly trained for long-distance paddle events. Surfing was just part of Kolefai's daily routine, and after several windy days had kept her out of the water, she figured the conditions were finally good enough for a morning session. The water was still pretty choppy, with patches of seaweed and foam drifting through the lineup. What nobody out there realized was that a yellow-bellied sea snake had actually been swept into the surf by those strong onshore winds. That's honestly not something that would have ever crossed my mind. Unlike most sea snakes, this species spends almost its entire life out in the open ocean and can become disoriented when it's pushed into breaking waves. It feeds mainly on small fish near the surface and rarely comes close to beaches under normal conditions, making encounters with swimmers and surfers extremely uncommon. A few other surfers were already waiting beyond the shore break as Kolefai paddled into position. While she was sitting on her board between sets with her legs in the water, the snake drifted into the coiled leash around her ankle and became tangled beneath the board. Seeing something bright yellow near her foot, she instinctively reached down to free it. The moment she grabbed it, the snake twisted and struck her hand several times before slipping back into the water. The bite marks were tiny and barely hurt, so Kolefai figured she'd probably brushed against a jellyfish or some other harmless marine animal. If all I saw were two tiny marks like that, my mind would have gone straight to a jellyfish too. After taking a quick look at her hand, she just kept surfing and rode another wave back to shore. But as she walked across the beach, she noticed her forearm starting to feel unusually heavy. Before long, nausea, dizziness, and muscle pain began setting in as the weakness spread through her arm. Realizing something was seriously wrong, she called her partner before dialing emergency services. Yellow-bellied sea snake venom primarily attacks skeletal muscle, while also affecting the nerves that control movement and breathing. As muscle cells begin breaking down, large amounts of myoglobin enter the bloodstream, placing heavy strain on the kidneys. Because the bite itself is often almost painless, serious symptoms can take time to appear, allowing dangerous muscle damage and progressive paralysis to develop before victims realize how severely they've been envenomated. By the time paramedics arrived, Kolefai was growing weaker and could barely grip with her injured hand. After arriving at a regional hospital, doctors recognized the signs of severe sea snake envenomation. She received intensive supportive treatment while doctors managed widespread rhabdomyolysis and its complications. Despite aggressive care, the weakness continued to worsen, eventually affecting the muscles needed for breathing. As respiratory failure developed alongside severe metabolic complications and kidney injury caused by muscle breakdown, she died from the effects of systemic envenomation. Her family later said, "What made the loss especially difficult was how minor the bite had seemed at first. My heart keeps going back to that tiny bite because it never looked like something that could do this." Friends from the local surfing community held a quiet memorial paddle in her honor, while the long-distance charity event she had been training for was never held. The incident received little attention outside the local community, but remained a sobering reminder that even experienced surfers can unknowingly encounter dangerous marine wildlife after prolonged periods of onshore winds. From the ocean, we're heading into a rainforest, where one hidden log concealed one of Central America's deadliest snakes. It was the 1st of August 2020 on a small family avocado farm in Alta Verapaz, Guatemala. What started as a routine morning harvest was about to end in a fatal encounter hidden among the fruit. Fiora Chambi was 48 years old and had been running the 5-acre avocado farm on her own since her husband passed away more than 10 years earlier. She was a member of the local Quiche Maya community and made a living selling her produce at a nearby market. Around the area, people knew her as someone who worked hard and rarely backed down from a long day's work. My mind keeps going back to how close her work was to the forest line, where farm and wilderness blur together. Several days of rain had delayed the harvest, and by then the avocados were at risk of falling before they could be picked. So, even though Fiora knew venomous snakes were common there and always wore rubber boots while working, she just couldn't afford to wait any longer. Her orchard sat right beside dense cloud forest, exactly the kind of place where fer-de-lance snakes are often found. Fer-de-lances are the leading cause of serious snake bites in much of Central America. While often associated with the forest floor, they are also capable climbers and may coil among low branches or fruit clusters while hunting. They rely heavily on camouflage rather than fleeing, often remaining completely motionless until something passes within striking distance, making them especially difficult to notice in dense vegetation. Their hemotoxic venom rapidly destroys tissue, damages blood vessels, and consumes clotting factors, causing extensive bleeding and severe swelling within a short period. As Fiora made her way up the hillside, she reached toward a cluster of ripe avocados and steadied herself with one hand on a low branch. But hidden in the leaves was a large fer-de-lance. The snake struck her inner left wrist without any warning, then immediately dropped to the ground and disappeared into the vegetation. She looked down and instantly recognized both the snake and the 2 puncture wounds on her wrist. Setting her harvest bag aside, she started making her way back up the steep path toward her house to get help. The climb was tough and took constant effort, and unfortunately, all that exertion likely helped the venom spread through her arm even faster. I can't help but notice how she still chose to move immediately, even after recognizing what had happened. Within minutes, swelling spread up her forearm. Unable to contact emergency services directly, she called a relative who alerted responders from another location. As Fiora waited alone, her condition rapidly worsened. Bleeding developed from her gums and nose, while blood continued seeping from the bite wounds without clotting. Her arm became severely swollen and discolored as tissue damage progressed. Eventually, she became too weak to keep speaking, leaving the phone line open while her relative listened helplessly from hundreds of miles away. My stomach drops a bit here because it turns into something you're hearing but can't respond to. Emergency responders reached the remote property and transported Fiora to a regional hospital where doctors immediately administered polyvalent antivenom and supportive care. By then, the venom had already caused widespread coagulopathy, extensive tissue damage, and early organ dysfunction. Despite treatment, her condition continued to deteriorate, and she died later that day from severe fer-de-lance envenomation. The medical investigation concluded that Fiora died from systemic hemorrhage, venom-induced coagulopathy, and multiple organ failure following a single Bothrops asper bite sustained while harvesting avocados. Investigators determined the snake had likely been concealed within the fruit cluster, making it nearly impossible to detect before it struck. The farm was sold several months later, and neighbors placed a simple wooden cross near the tree where the incident occurred. Beyond the local community, the case received little public attention. This time, the snake wasn't hidden at all. It was sitting right in front of trained professionals, and things still went terribly wrong. It was September 4th, 2015, at a private exotic animal clinic on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. What began as a routine examination of a venomous reptile quickly became a fatal medical emergency. Brill Krell was 38 years old and had spent more than a decade working as an exotic animal veterinarian. Colleagues knew him as someone who was careful and methodical, and he mostly specialized in reptiles and other uncommon species, while, of course, balancing family life with his wife and 2 young children. I'm hearing how long he's been doing this while he's already moving through the clinic setup. Later that day, a private reptile owner arrived looking for treatment for a large king cobra with an injury near its snout. The snake measured just over 10 feet long and, as you'd expect, had to be physically restrained before it could be examined safely. Because of its size and strength, the procedure involved 3 people: the owner, a veterinary technician, and Brill. King cobras are the world's longest venomous snakes and possess an unusually large venom yield compared with most species. Despite their name, they don't hunt people or large animals. Their primary prey is other snakes, including venomous species, and they usually avoid humans whenever possible. Unlike many venomous snakes that deliver a quick defensive bite, king cobras can maintain their grip, injecting venom continuously for several seconds. Their predominantly neurotoxic venom attacks the nervous system, leading to progressive paralysis and respiratory failure if enough venom is delivered. That detail about them holding on instead of releasing quickly changes the entire feel of a bite like this. The team began guiding the cobra into a transparent restraint tube, a standard technique used to safely immobilize venomous snakes for examination. At first, the animal appeared to cooperate, but as more of its body entered the tube, it suddenly resisted. In one powerful movement, it twisted sideways and pulled its head free before anyone could regain control. Brill instinctively stepped backward, but the cobra's striking range was actually greater than he expected. It lunged forward and clamped onto his left forearm, holding on for several seconds before the technician finally knocked it away with a handling hook. It left behind just 2 small puncture marks that caused very little pain, just a faint warming sensation. Brill immediately knew how serious the bite was. He told the technician to call emergency services while the snake was secured. The clinic had a plan for emergencies like this, but king cobra antivenom wasn't routinely stored on site. It had to be rushed in from another licensed facility that maintained king cobra antivenom, and even that process cost valuable time before treatment could begin. Within minutes, Brill's speech became noticeably slower as the neurotoxic venom spread through his body. His eyelids drooped, his muscles weakened, and breathing became increasingly difficult as the nerves controlling his diaphragm began to fail. Although he remained conscious for much of this progression, he gradually lost the ability to move or speak. Paramedics secured Brill's airway before transporting him to a regional hospital, where physicians continued advanced life support while the antivenom was transported. Despite mechanical ventilation and antivenom, the severity of the envenomation proved irreversible, and he died the following day from complications of severe neurotoxic envenomation. I'm still stuck on how much intervention is already happening while the situation doesn't turn around. The subsequent investigation concluded that Brill died from fatal king cobra envenomation after the snake escaped partial restraint during the procedure. Investigators found no evidence that established handling protocols had been ignored. The reptile owner later received administrative penalties related to permit requirements, while the veterinary technician left exotic animal practice in the months that followed. The incident received a little public attention outside the local veterinary community. I figured the most dangerous snake bite would happen because someone made a mistake. This one happened while someone was trying to do the right thing. Up next, a volunteer rescuer cuts one final strand of netting and everything changes in an instant. It was July 23, 2018, in a rural farming area on the outskirts of Dehradun, India. What started as a routine wildlife rescue, quickly turned into a fatal snakebite incident. Alessia Sundal was 34 years old and worked as a primary school teacher while volunteering with a local wildlife rescue group on weekends. Known for her calm demeanor, she frequently responded to reports of snakes entering homes and farmland using basic capture equipment and years of practical experience. Earlier that day, a local farmer called the volunteer rescue group after spotting a large snake tangled in the protective netting around his vegetable garden. He was too afraid to go near it, so he just waited for help to arrive. When Alessia got there, she found a female Russell's viper tightly wrapped in the net around its neck and middle, lying there under the hot afternoon sun. If it were left like that much longer, the net would have been cutting deeper just from the snake movements alone. Russell's vipers are among the deadliest snakes in South Asia and account for a significant number of fatal snake bites each year. Their long, hinged fangs deliver a potent hemotoxic venom that destroys tissue, damages blood vessels, and rapidly interferes with the body's ability to clot blood. Even experienced handlers remain at risk because injured or restrained snakes often strike reflexively once freed. Russell's vipers are also commonly found around farms and villages because rodents are abundant there, bringing the snakes into frequent contact with people. After putting on a pair of canvas gloves, Alessia carefully began cutting the netting away, working from the snake's tail toward its head, while the farmer watched from a safe distance. Little by little, most of the snake came free, leaving only a few strands around its neck. But as she cut the final section, the snake suddenly lunged before she could step back. Both fangs pierced the glove and the back of her right hand. It held on briefly before slipping into the nearby vegetation. When Alessia removed her glove, she saw 2 deep puncture wounds, but there was almost no swelling yet. She immediately recognized what had happened, but stayed calm. She called the volunteer coordinator, identified the species, photographed the bite, kept her arm still, and avoided cutting the wound or trying to suck out the venom. The glove comes off damp and briefly stuck at the wrist before slipping free. Even with all the right steps, though, her condition started getting worse pretty quickly. The swelling spread through her hand and up her forearm as dark bruising began forming beneath the skin. Before long, she was vomiting. Then, her gums started bleeding, and small hemorrhages appeared in her eyes, all signs that the venom was already destroying her blood's ability to clot while causing extensive tissue damage. Emergency responders arrived and transported Alessia to a regional hospital, where doctors immediately administered antivenom and intensive supportive care. Although treatment began as quickly as possible, the venom had already triggered severe coagulopathy, widespread internal bleeding, and progressive tissue destruction. Her condition continued to worsen despite repeated doses of antivenom, blood products, and intensive critical care. The stretcher straps pressed down across her arm as she lifted into the ambulance, and I noticed her arm pinned. Over the following day, complications of severe hemorrhage and acute kidney injury progressed to irreversible multi-organ failure. Alessia died despite continued intensive care. The subsequent medical investigation concluded that Alessia died from fatal Russell's viper envenomation, resulting in severe hemotoxic injury, coagulopathy, and multiple organ failure. Investigators determined the bite occurred immediately after the snake was freed, when it reacted instinctively before she had a chance to retreat. The volunteer rescue group later encouraged handlers to use longer cutting tools and maintain greater standoff distances during similar rescues. The incident received little public attention beyond a brief regional newspaper report, but remained a lasting reminder of the risks faced by volunteer wildlife rescuers. Our next story unfolds almost entirely in the dark, where the biggest clue was 2 tiny puncture marks nobody noticed until it was too late. It was February 10th, 2021, at a remote industrial construction site in northwestern Bangladesh. As the workers settled into their shared dorms after a long shift, nobody realized a silent encounter was about to unfold, while most of the camp slept. That image of workers going back into those shared dorms after shift sticks with me more than it probably should. Ronnie Caspi was 41 years old and worked as an electrical contractor from Batangas province in the Philippines. By then, he was on his third overseas assignment, helping install electrical systems at industrial sites while, like so many overseas workers, regularly sending money home to support his wife and 3 teenage children. The workers lived in prefabricated dormitories along the edge of farmland bordered by rice paddies and scrubland. The rooms were simple, with folding cots, minimal barriers against wildlife, and gaps beneath the exterior doors. Ronnie shared his room with another contractor, and after finishing work, eating dinner, and showering, he went to bed without noticing anything unusual. The surrounding countryside provided ideal habitat for the common crate, one of South Asia's most dangerous venomous snakes. Primarily active at night, common crates often enter buildings through small openings in search of warmth or rodents. During the day, they remain hidden beneath debris or vegetation, which is why many bites occur while people are asleep. Their bites are often painless and leave little visible evidence, while their venom progressively damages the nerve terminals controlling muscle movement and breathing. Sometime during the night, an adult common crate slipped beneath the door and moved across the room. As Ronnie shifted in his sleep, the snake reacted defensively and bit the outside of his ankle before disappearing. The bite caused almost no pain, and he never woke. Only 2 faint puncture marks remained, barely visible against his skin. Over the next several hours, the venom quietly spread through his nervous system. Because the toxins act gradually, victims often remain unaware until paralysis is well underway. Ronnie's breathing slowly became weaker as communication between his nerves and muscles progressively failed. Eventually, he could no longer move or call for help despite remaining conscious during much of the paralysis. Before dawn, Ronnie's roommate woke up and immediately noticed something was wrong. Ronnie's breathing didn't sound normal, and he wasn't responding. Thinking it was some kind of serious medical emergency, he quickly called the site's emergency team. At first, though, nobody noticed the tiny bite marks on Ronnie's ankle, so the real cause wasn't recognized as his condition kept getting worse. They almost missed the only physical sign something had already happened. Ronnie was rushed to a regional hospital, where doctors finally noticed the faint puncture marks while preparing him for treatment. He was intubated and given antivenom, but by then, the venom had already caused irreversible damage to the presynaptic nerve terminals controlling muscle movement. He remained on a ventilator for weeks with intensive supportive care, but never regained the ability to breathe on his own. After discussions with his family back in the Philippines, life support was withdrawn, and Ronnie died from complications of common crate envenomation. The medical investigation later concluded that he'd been bitten in his sleep after the snake slipped into the workers' dorm through a gap beneath the door. Following the incident, the site installed door sweeps and improved pest exclusion measures throughout the housing units. The case received little attention outside the area, but remains a reminder of how a common crate bite can go completely unnoticed until paralysis is already well underway. I thought if you kept your eyes on the ground, you'd probably see the danger coming. For our final story, the snake wasn't on the trail at all. It was hiding inside an avocado tree, exactly where a farmer was about to reach. It was November 29th, 2016, at a private rural property near Costa Rica's Tortuguero region. As daylight began to fade, a university field trip ended in a fatal encounter with one of Central America's most dangerous snakes. That fading daylight makes me think how fast visibility drops once you're inside that kind of forest edge. Mateo Zuleta was 27 years old and in his final year studying environmental management at a public university. Passionate about wildlife photography and field research, he had organized a camping trip with two classmates to document amphibians and forest ecosystems during the rainy season. The property bordered dense secondary rainforest, where fallen logs, thick leaf litter, and humid conditions provided ideal habitat for fer-de-lance snake. Mateo had previous field experience and knew the species inhabited the region, but after years without a dangerous encounter, he had grown comfortable working in the forest. While his friends prepared dinner at camp, he walked alone into the trees to collect firewood before nightfall. Fer-de-lances are responsible for more serious snake bites in Central America than any other snake. They're incredibly well camouflaged, often disappearing among fallen leaves and rotting wood, especially later in the afternoon when they become more active. Rather than fleeing, they usually remain motionless until the last moment, which is why people often don't realize one is there until after it's already struck. Their venom is extremely destructive, damaging tissue, injuring blood vessels, and disrupting the body's ability to clot, leading to rapid swelling and severe bleeding. As Mateo searched through the fallen timber, he grabbed a large, rotting log with both hands and lifted it. Hidden underneath, well, there was a large fer-de-lance. It reacted instantly, striking his right hand before disappearing back into the undergrowth. Blood immediately appeared around two puncture wounds between his thumb and index finger, and almost right away, an intense burning pain started spreading toward his wrist. That log lift is what sticks with me, because his hands were directly over its hiding spot. Hearing him yell for help, his friends ran into the forest and found the swelling already spreading through his hand. They kept his injured arm still and called emergency services as soon as they reached an area with phone reception. Even then, the venom was already working quickly. His hand became severely swollen. Blisters formed around the bite, and the surrounding tissue began showing early signs of necrosis. As the swelling advanced up his arm, he started vomiting. His gums began bleeding, and he showed signs that his circulation was beginning to fail. Emergency responders eventually reached the remote campsite and rushed Mateo to a regional hospital. Doctors administered polyvalent antivenom and began aggressive treatment. But by then, the venom had already caused extensive tissue damage and venom-induced consumption coagulopathy. Despite intensive supportive care and surgery to manage the damaged tissue, his condition continued to deteriorate. Over the next day, widespread tissue necrosis, ongoing clotting failure, and complications from hypovolemic shock became irreversible. Mateo died from complications of the fer-de-lance bite. The delay before treatment makes the hospital response feel too late. The investigation later concluded that the bite happened when Mateo unknowingly lifted a log where the snake had been hiding during its more active period near dusk. Investigators found no major mistakes beyond the fact that he'd gone into the forest alone as visibility was starting to fade. Afterward, the property owner warned future visitors to avoid the forest edge in the late afternoon and evening. The case received very little attention outside the local area, but it remains a reminder of just how quickly a severe Bothrops asper bite can become fatal when help is far away.